Pile on the brown man's burden, and through the world proclaim that ye are freedom's agent, there's no more paying game. And should your own past history straight in your teeth be thrown, retort that independence is good for whites alone. At the 1884 Berlin Conference, King Leopold II of Belgium seized the Congo Basin and made it his personal property. But rather than ending the West African slave trade as he had promised, Leopold bound the Congolese into forced labor on his rubber plantations. To ensure obedience, or sometimes just for the sake of pleasure, King Leopold's men killed and maimed millions of innocent Africans. It wasn't until the turn of the century that the world discovered the crimes of the Belgians. In 1908, the international community forced the Belgian parliament to annex the colony, ending the worst abuses. Still, racist Belgian policymakers deprived the Congolese of education and forbid the Africans from having any voice in their government. But despite Belgian efforts to isolate their colony, by the mid-1950s the nationalism sweeping Africa struck a nerve in the Congo. In 1958, as nationalist agitation mounted, the Belgians finally allowed the Congolese to form political parties. However, the parties that formed were tribally based and could only succeed locally in the extremely diverse Congo. But one party, the non-tribal Mouvement National Congolais, or MNC, was able to gain national support and triumph over Belgian colonialism. Its strength came not only from its pan-tribal, pan-African policies, but also from the personality and power of its leader, Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba, a little-known Congolese postal clerk and nationalist, was catapulted into prominence in 1958 when African nationalists met in Accra, Ghana at the All-African People's Conference. Lumumba's contact with Kwame Nkrumah, the president and founder of Ghana, inspired him to form his own Pan-African party, the Mouvement National Congolais. But while Lumumba was in Ghana, bloody riots shook the city of Leopoldville. Afraid of further violence, the Belgians saw only one way to restore order. Just over a week later, King Baudouin of Belgium announced that his country would grant the Congo independence. However, King Baudouin, who failed to see the extent of Congolese unity and still planned to hold on to the Congo indefinitely, had named no date. He hoped that the false promise of independence would pacify the Congo, but instead instability increased as Patrice Lumumba and other nationalist leaders pushed for immediate independence. Fearing a revolution, the Belgians set a series of talks called the Round Table Conference to begin on January 20, 1960, in Brussels. The Belgians expected that the Congolese would be too divided to negotiate effectively. In particular, the delegates from the southern province of Katanga, more puppets of Belgian mining interests than representatives of the people, were opposed to independence. But to the surprise of all, when the Africans landed in Brussels, they pledged to join together with Lumumba's MNC to demand immediate independence. The strength of the Congolese, combined with the weak Belgian economy and a rising anti-colonial sentiment among the Belgian youth, tied the hands of the Belgian negotiators. Once again, Belgium was forced to give in to Congolese demands. Elections were scheduled and Independence Day was set for June 30, 1960. The Congo seemed to have done the impossible. A nation with only 2 years of political experience had triumphed over European oppression to elect its own government, dominated by the MNC. Lumumba himself, now a national hero, became prime minister. At the Independence Day ceremonies, King Baudouin delivered a speech to his former colony.
L'indépendance du Congo constitue l'aboutissement de l'œuvre conçue par le génie du roi Léopold II, entreprise par lui avec un courage tenace et continuée avec persévérance par la Belgique.
But Lumumba was unwilling to let Baudouin praise Leopold's oppressive rule.
Nous avons connu les ironies, les insultes, les coups que nous devions subir matin, midi et soir, parce que nous étions des nègres. Qui oubliera qu'à un noir, on disait tu, non certes comme à un ami, mais parce que les voix honorables étaient réservées aux seuls blancs.
This address, the tears, fire, and blood speech, won Lumumba support from the Congolese people, who remembered their abuse at the hands of the Belgians. However, it also worsened tensions between the new nation and Belgium, which feared losing the capital it had invested in Congolese industry and mining. These tensions worsened when the Congolese army, the Force Publique, which expected Lumumba to Africanize the army, decided to mutiny rather than remain under white officers. Even though the violence was halted with the election of black officers, Belgium still sent in its army. Instead of pacifying the Congo, the Belgian presence caused further violence. Lumumba tried to restore order, but his efforts were stymied by illegal and unwarranted Belgian intervention. To the Africans, it seemed the Belgians were stealing back the independence given only a week before. And in Katanga, they actually were. Katanga was not only the most industrialized province in the Congo, it also contained 60% of the world's cobalt, vast seams of copper and gold, and one of the richest supplies of uranium in the world. In an attempt to maintain control of those resources, Belgium backed Katanga when it ceded just 11 days after independence. Lumumba turned to the United Nations, but Cold War tensions froze the Security Council. European members were unwilling to harm their ally Belgium. America refused to aid Lumumba, a supposed communist, and the Soviet Union was more interested in using the conflict for propaganda than helping the Congo. Eventually, United Nations soldiers would replace the Belgians in every province except secessionist Katanga, the area where the UN was most desperately needed. The UN's inaction left Lumumba with no choice but to invade Katanga. The invasion, combined with Lumumba's wartime restrictions of civil liberties, convinced his opponents that he had gone too far. Lumumba's chief rival in the Congolese government, Joseph Kasavubu, used an obscure law to remove Lumumba and many of his ministers from office. Lumumba in turn called on Parliament, which removed Kasavubu. Several attempts were made at reconciliation, but Kasavubu refused. In this power vacuum, Colonel Mobutu, senior commander of the Force Publique in Leopoldville, seized control and placed Lumumba under house arrest. Hoping to regain power, Lumumba attempted to flee, but was captured by Mobutu's soldiers. The Belgian government arranged for Lumumba to be flown to secessionist Katanga, a sure death sentence. On January 17th he arrived, bound, badly beaten, and missing his glasses. Now, in front of cameras, he was beaten again and forced to eat a transcript of his Independence Day speech. He was never seen nor heard from again. On February 13th, the Katangan government announced Patrice Lumumba had been killed. The world reacted in shock and outrage. Although Western governments saw Lumumba as a threat, to the people of the world, he was, and still is, a nationalist, a hero, and after February 13th, a martyr. He had been killed by a firing squad commanded by Belgian officers who then destroyed the body. His remains were hacked into pieces, dissolved in acid, and burned. The Belgian government did not apologize for its actions until February of 2002. In the wake of Lumumba's tragic death, the Congo lapsed into a deadly civil war. Ultimately, power passed into the hands of the bloody dictator Colonel Joseph Mobutu, who ruled by fear and violence. It is necessary to recognize Lumumba's role in the collapse of the Congo. His failure to Africanize the army gave Belgium the excuse it needed to intervene, and his increasingly authoritarian rule allowed his rivals to secure his ouster. But without Patrice Lumumba, there could never have been an independent Congo. He was crucial in uniting the Congolese people enough to force the Belgians to the bargaining table in 1960, and once there to grant independence. His leadership carried the Congo through the Force Publique mutinies and the economic crisis that faced the fledgling government. But for the actions of the Belgians and the inaction of the United Nations, the tragic collapse of the Congo could have instead been the triumphant birth of a free, democratic nation. In November 2006, as the Congo held its first free elections since those of 1960, and today as Africa struggles under the yoke of poverty and oppression, he is remembered as the embodiment of hope, unity, and the glory that should belong to Africa. His last letter, written shortly before his death, concluded, "Africa will write its own history, and to the north and south of the Sahara it will be a glorious and dignified history. I know that my country, which is suffering so much, will know how to defend its independence and its liberty. Long live the Congo, long live Africa."